Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. So I'm not gonna lie, I sell weed because I have a car. Sometimes I make deliveries for people who live a little bit further away. A couple of weeks ago, one of my homies needed a sack for himself and a friend of his. I've known this dude for 15 plus years now, so if he says his friend is cool, then I'm cool too. Setting up the sack he wanted and some supplies of my other strains for the buddy, I set out on the 30-minute drive to the south side of my city. Now, I'm not a small woman by any means. I'm 5'6" and weigh 200 pounds of thick muscle. I also carry a .380 on my hip at all times, so I'm not really someone people tend to mess with. When I arrived at my homie's house, we had our introductions, smoked a blunt, and I started sharing my samples with the new guy. He seemed alright at first. He was polite, made eye contact, and didn't fidget too much. My homie said he had to make a phone call and stepped outside. It sounded like he was having some sort of spat with his old lady. The friend and I sparked up the blunt again as we discussed pricing and such for the different buds. Then out of nowhere, he said this: "Do you know how dangerous it is for a woman to sell JCX?" I stared at him blankly. What the fuck had possessed him to just randomly say that? I shrugged, not really knowing how to respond. Seems like it would be real easy for someone to rob you and do some other things too. His voice dripped with something I'd never heard before, malice, perhaps. This dude was making me feel real nervous, making me cross my legs and drop my hand to my side. I started looking out the window, wondering where my friend was. Oh, he's gonna be a while now. She got him cheating or something, and now they're fighting about Kish. So how'd you get into this game? His words seemed genuine once more. The malice I sensed earlier had abated somewhat, so I answered him honestly. Kids, bills, usual story, I said, beginning to nervously tap my finger, waiting for my friend to come back in. Then he reached out and grabbed hold of my leg, not like the gentle caress you'd do if you were making advances either, but a tight squeeze on my knee. So tight it made me gasp in pain and left heavy bruises. You know, I should just take you out back and leave you in the desert. No one would ever know. The dude was threatening me now. Everyone thinks they'll act a certain way in certain situations. I mean, the whole reason I carry a gun is to protect myself, but I was suddenly frozen in a state of shock. Before either of us could say another thing, my friend threw open the door in a huff. A sigh of relief escaped my lips as the guy released his grip on my knee. I quickly ran to my feet, grabbing my bag and the samples from the table, murmuring about how I had to run. Without even making sure I'd gotten the money for the sack, I booked it to my truck, threw it in reverse, and sped out of there as fast as my truck would allow me. I sprayed rocks behind the tires as I peeled out of that gravel driveway. I haven't been back to see that friend since. I've been dodging his phone calls and visits. I don't need his money that bad. 15 plus years thrown away just because he had bad taste in other people. I live in a quiet neighborhood in a suburban town in Queensland, Australia, with my roommate, a 25-year-old woman. We're childhood friends and are both finishing our studies at university. These occurrences started around 2 months ago, with the most recent update happening only last weekend. About 2 months ago, I was lying in bed late at night, watching a soccer game and drifting in and out of sleep. I usually use it as background noise to help me sleep since I'm naturally a nocturnal person. I was just on the edge of being awake and asleep when I heard an urgent pounding at the front door. My bedroom is about 10 meters from the door and backs onto the front courtyard. The knock startled me. At first, I wasn't sure if it was real, a dream, or just in my head. I lay still, listening for more. I knew it couldn't be my roommate. She was out of town for the week visiting family and attending a wedding. After a moment, there was a second knock, just as loud. No one called out or said anything. I'm not easily scared and enjoy horror movies, but I was frozen, unable to move. No further knocks came, but I couldn't sleep and stayed awake until 4 a.m. I called my roommate the next morning, asking if she knew anyone who might come by late at night, but she was just as confused as I was. A week passed, and I didn't give it much more thought. I assumed it was a drunk person mistaking our house for theirs. Then, on the following Saturday, I was at work during a night shift when my roommate texted me. Someone was knocking on the door again. Even though I wasn't there, the same fear from the previous week washed over me. She reassured me the doors were locked, but admitted she was scared, knowing it had happened to me too. This time, there was no second knock. When I got home, the front yard was untouched, and no one was around. Our neighborhood is usually very quiet, with mostly elderly couples living on the street. In the morning, my roommate was still shaken, so I sent an anonymous tip to a Crime Stoppers service, but they never followed up. Nothing else happened for a month and a half, and we moved on with our lives. I even stopped working Saturday night shifts since it was the only link between the incidents. Last weekend, I was up late in the living room watching Black Mirror. It was about 1 a.m., and I planned to go to bed after finishing the episode. The living room is right next to the front door, with a path leading to the door visible through a large window. As I watched, the motion sensor light outside turned on, its glow visible under the blinds. I froze, suddenly reminded of the previous knocking. A moment later, the knocking began, loud and urgent. At first, I waited, hoping whoever it was would leave, but after the second knock, I decided to check the peephole. I thought maybe it was someone from my roommate's past relationships messing with her, but it wasn't. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. She was staring straight ahead, completely still, like a statue. Her eyes had no expression, and it was as if she could see through the peephole, staring directly at me. She stood there for about 2 minutes, then suddenly looked to the side and ran into the darkness. I called the police and explained what had happened. They arrived shortly after, checked the cars on the street, and found nothing. They told me to call again if something happened. What haunted me was the way she stood there, emotionless, like she wasn't thinking at all. The way she ran off was strange, too. She looked to be in her 30s, wearing a thin nightdress with no shoes. It was freezing outside, and I'd never seen her in the neighborhood before. Since then, I've ordered a doorbell camera just in case she comes back. But honestly, I flinch every time someone knocks on that door now. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.